What's up, YouTubians? Gary, VW Jawbreaker. Welcome to, I guess, part one, but really part two of the mini stroker series. So this is going to be a 1641, but instead of a 69mm stock crank, we have a small stroker crank, a 74mm stroker crank to be exact, which is going to make this a 1760cc engine. This is a spare parts build. This video, we're going to be diving in and doing nothing but all the case prep and case work. So in order to do that, we need to go ahead and mock up of the crank so we can go ahead and sit it in the case and figure out exactly where we need to clearance, what all we need to do. So let's dive into that here in a minute. But first, we need to get the 60 out of the way, so I got a little bit more work room in here since, you know, it's just a regular garage. Woohoo, exciting stuff. For those that have asked, right? So yes, Jawbreaker was originally on the road. Awesome car, love that car. I built this 2054 for that car, but then right after I built the engine and put it in Jawbreaker is when I got the 60. So the 2054 that originally was in Jawbreaker is in the 60, and yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. It was purpose built before I even really knew there was a purpose other than I wanted a bigger motor. Let's go ahead and get the 60 move out of the way. Let's do a cold start on her. Fire her up, back her out. Let's get crack-a-lacking. All right, so to bring you up to speed, kind of start things off, again, this is a stock cast crank that has been reground to make it a 74 stroke. So basically what they did is they just moved the journals out this way some. So if you notice, super close to the edge there. This is not going to be a high RPM engine. This thing should be fine. Again, it's a used parts build, so we're just kind of using parts that we have, right? Now, if you notice here, I've marked this one yellow. That's because this particular rod journal is 10 under. The other rod journals are the same. They're all standard. Now, you can pick up one of these little doodads here. They sell a couple different ones. These are for type 1 mains. It shows your standard, your 10, 20, 30 under. And you can pick these up from CIP1, I believe. CSP makes these. There's, I think, another one out there. And I think Dub Shop just started making one as well. You can basically just slap that thing on there, or whichever one. If you see a little gap there at the bottom, you know it's too big, or I'm sorry, too small. This is too small, that's too big. So you can just kind of rotate it around. You can do a quick check and find out exactly where you're at. Of course, this is no substitute for an actual caliper, whether you use regular or digital, that's up to you. One thing I do recommend is I found a engine build sheet online a long time ago, and I actually sit there and just kind of tweaked it and modified it to make it what I look for and the things I like to do. So first things first, we need to go ahead and slip on our rod bearings, get our rods on. Again, this is not a final, assembly. This is just a mock-up. Throw a little oil on the bearings, get things cinched down so we can drop it in, see what's going on. So thanks to AA Performance, we got our little care package in. Yes, I paid for this stuff, but they did help out some. So I definitely appreciate AA Performance. I've been shopping there for a long time, getting good stuff from them over the years. So we'll go ahead and bust out our rod bearings. Unfortunately, I had to get two different ones because we've got some standard and one 10 under, but it is what it is. We'll go ahead and get this together and we'll go from there. Before I forget, these stock rods here, what I do is I don't have a actual internal bore gauge to measure diameter. What I do have is telescopic bore gauges, so I can put that in there, run it around, make sure it's nice and square all the way around, and then take my measurements with the caliper from there. So that's now, one of the reasons I went with the mall bearings instead of the Silverline bearings, if you've noticed here, you've got a little tang that fits in that little tang groove. Can you see that? Yes, you can. So that tang goes in that tang groove. These fit absolutely perfect. There's That right there sits perfectly in that tang groove. On the silver lines, these actually sit cattywampus a little bit like that. You actually have to file the edges of the tang bearing, the tang itself on the bearing, to get that to sit flush in there. Spend a few extra dollars, get some quality bearings, you don't have that issue. Alright, since we're right here, we'll go ahead and figure out our side play, but if you notice also, there's a little bump up. So you want the bumps to go up on the cylinder that they're supposed to be on. So we have that done. Again, this is just mock-up. We want to see what's going on. Not liking that rod at all. That one's good. That one's good. So your side-to-side should be no more than 16 thousandths. So we'll go ahead and grab a feeler gauge here. Grab 16. I can't get it in there. So our side to side on this one is 10 thou. This is the one I'm kind of worried about. That's really loose. That's going to cause a problem. I'll have to figure something else out here. Yeah, it's greater than 16. Can't even get the 16 in. Drop to 14. Yep, just get 14 in. So that one's at 14. 10. Oh, just get 10 in there as well. I'd say that's good. This rod here, let me go find another rod. Better. All right, so now that we've got this situated, we'll go ahead and move on over to the engine case. All I'm going to do is put probably just the number 2 bearing and put the rear bearing on there. That way we can set it in the case and we can start moving things around and see how it does. Alright, so one thing that's going to make life easier for you is your dowel and oiling hole. Get your bearing lined up, get it seated in place, run a Sharpie mark on both sides, and then I like to put a line in the center pointing back towards the back of the engine. What that's going to do is help you actually get things lined up better. So there we go. Now we have our orientation for that bearing, and we'll go ahead and drop the next one in place. Same thing. And of course you've got your middle one here that has a split bearing. I guess it's not really a middle, is it? Then you've got your back thrust. The back thrust can actually be the worst one for me anyway to kind of line up. So there we go. I know it dropped in. Line on the sides. And again, little arrow. Dead center top. That way I know exactly orientation of my bearing. Alright, now with our bearings in place, we know exactly when we drop our crank orientation of the dowel pin so we can set it in and get everything locked in a little easier. But there's one thing I wasn't going to show yet, but we might as well since we're here talking about main bearings. So with our main bearings in place, believe it or not, this oil groove right here doesn't always line up perfectly with the oil hole in the case. So easiest way to solve that and check is I use a little bit of black paint. So let me set you up real quick and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Alright, so we take our marked bearing, take a little bit of flat black or whatever color paint you want to use, hit it on there, put your bearing back in place, make sure it's good and seated, pull it out, and right there I can see this one's actually lined up pretty decent. The hole just barely comes across. So on this one, I probably wouldn't touch it. Then you just take a little brake clean or something and wipe it right off. Good to go. We'll go ahead and check the others as well while we're here. And if you see right there, right there, you can see half a hole. Same with right there, about a quarter of a hole. And now this one here, you really don't have to worry about too much. It's got a tiny little oiling hole because you don't want a ton of full oil going to this front bearing due to the fact it's right here by the slinger and the pulley. So never drill that one out, and I guarantee you that one's fine, but we'll check it. Yep, you can see it right there. So we've got our round hole, and there's our hole, so we're good. So all we did was take and just kind of bevel that side so the oil will flow gently into the hole. You don't want any hard, sharp edges. So it's just something I do. Now we just take our marks, line those up. You can usually kind of feel too when it starts to drop in. Here's an easy way to know if your crank's all the way in. Is take your other half bearing. See it rock? Crank's not all the way down. Yeah, we got some case clearancing to do for sure. Alright, let me bring you around and kind of show you what's going on here. Alright, it's going to be kind of hard to point and shoot and all this stuff all at once. But if you look here, if you think about it, your rod's going to be kind of halfway in between those two studs, right? That's going to be kind of center of the bore. And if you look right down here, man, I can't even get a screwdriver tip. So what we need to do is we need to kind of mark, all right, and then go in there and clearance just a little bit. But then the other spot it's kind of hitting when I rotate it around is right down here. So we just need to kind of sand this down a little bit, and then we should have enough clearance. So I've actually had to grind quite a bit right here. As you can tell, man, it is really close. I'm not touching. Man, that's close. So we need to take some more off right there. Let me get a marker and mark it. Oops, sorry. So basically, all through right there is where it's got to come off some more. Now, this wouldn't honestly be so much of an issue if you were running aftermarket rods and not stock rods. Aftermarket rods bolt down through, and this is a lot more rounded down here and not so squared off. Up top, we're good. We've got about 80 thousandths of clearance up top, so I'll continue on that. Well, that was fun. I ended up taking a smidge more off right here than I really needed to, but everything spins just fine. We have nice rotation, no clearance issues. Got about 80 plus thousandths up here on the top, and as you saw, I kind of took a cartridge roll to everything, kind of smoothed it out real well. Same with over here. As you can see there, kind of just smoothed everything over real well. Same with up here. So nice and smooth now. No sharp edges anywhere. Now, if this was a counterweight crank, you know, you got your counterweights that stick down more, and depending on more of the stroke you go, you may actually have to go down into the webs down here and clearance some more. So, but for the most part, looking good. Now, time to do that side. I'm not going to bore you. I'm going to get to work. All right, well, we got the other side all taken care of. So now, I have an idea. I say let's mock it up and run it through and see if anything hits. How are you going to do that? Watch this. Now with the rubber bands in place holding the rods pretty much center where they need to be for the stroke, yep, we're hitting somewhere. So if you watch these rods, they're not bouncing or anything, but if we come around to this side, if you watch these rods here, and then go and turn it, you see that one jump? That one jumped. That one jumped. So we're hitting somewhere. Okay, we're hitting at the spigots here in the center. So this is why we test things. All right, coming up. Yep. There we go. Let's try to go backwards, and that's where it hit. So right there on the spigot, I forgot to do the spigots on this side just ever so slightly to relieve that rod bolt. So we'll do that, and we'll put it all back together and try again. So I'm going with 3rd time's the charm. Nope, close. This one here is barely hitting. Tons of room on that one. Let's flip her. Tons of room. Tons of room. Little bit right there. 4th time is the charm. Tons of room. And see right there, 4 takes. You've got to kind of hit things little by little, right? That's why it's mock-up. You know, the reason I use the rubber bands is to simulate the jugs being on there and the pistons being on there, right? Help hold it center so we know that everything's going to flow properly. And that's why when I did it, I rotated it, I also kind of turned it around a little bit as well to make sure I had additional clearance. So just trial and error, little bit by little bit. But this is why this is all mock-up. That's why I don't have all the bearings on there, the gears and all that stuff on the crank, because I'm going to take everything apart and clean it before we do final assembly.
Well, it's a couple days later. It got way too hot. So now that we have the case all squared away and everything clearanced and moving nice, let's go ahead and prep this case for tapping it for full flow and doing a couple other engine mods that I like to do to the case. So I'll go ahead and get this disassembled and we'll dive into that.
Now for tapping the case, we're going to go through this plug right here. We need to remove that aluminum plug out of the case. Take yourself a drill bit carefully and a punch that the drill bit will fit into. Carefully. You want to go slow, not too fast. Then take your punch, slowly start working it sideways. You don't want to work hard, just wiggle it back and forth. You already just saw it move. Boom, there we go. We got the plug out of there. So now we need to drill and tap. And just remember, these are very soft cases. But we've got our drill and our tap. This is a 3/8 NTP, and this is a 3764 size drill bit, which comes in the kit. Turn it on slow and just go easy. Now for the tap, just make sure you get it started nice and straight. And this is going to cut really easy. And being NTP, this is tapered. You're going to want to run roughly half the tap in. But I'll show you an easy way to figure out if you've got enough in there or not. So as you see, we take a little bit of that off. You don't want to run this too deep either, because you will split this boss right here. I mean, we're only a few turns in, and it stops right about there, because remember, that tap is tapered. So you can run it in, and let's say you don't stop right here. Say you stop right, you know, pointing down. Put your tap back in, do about another full turn, and then it'll get you about where you need to be. So that's good. Now I want to show you what I do with this. I've never been a fan of how that is in there. You notice right there too, there's that step inside. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to drill this fitting out. So again, this is a 3/8 NTP fitting. This is a 7/16 drill bit. So it's going to fit right down in there. Nice and smooth. Just the diameter so we can take that lip out. So you just want to go nice and slow. And if you notice there, it actually cleaned up the inside and got most of that step inside removed. So now we got a little bit better of a free flow. Actually, I'm going to take that down a little bit further down. Actually, no, I think that's pretty good. Took it down right about there. Go a tick further. Go just a tick further. There we go, that cleaned that up quite a bit. So now the oil flow comes up a lot nicer and has a lot gradual transition. And we got rid of that slight little step inside, which would cause ever so slight resistance. You want this to free flow as much as possible. It's just something I like to do. All right, now that we have our inlet hole, here is the output side of the oil pump that would feed this way, right, and go over and in. Problem is, now that we're feeding oil in here and we're not using the output of the pump to go in here, pressure can backfeed and slightly going between the case and the pump. Essentially, you lose oil pressure there. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill and tap this for a plug. So this is a 1/4 inch NTP plug. Make sure you get it started straight. End up having to go a little bit deeper, and then of course you guys kind of cut out a little bit. There we go, start to get snug. There we go. And it's just below the surface right there. So I can actually take a little file, run across, and I can see that, yep, we're just below the surface. That's perfect. All right, now this side of the case is fully done. So we've got drilled and tapped here. We've got our drill and tap here. That way we can full flow and not have pushback. Got everything clearanced. Everything's looking good. This side of the case, same thing. I need to go through and actually clean up with the cartridge roll. We'll do that off camera. But the last thing that I like to do is something that a lot of people don't talk about. And that is, if you notice, it's the same thing on this side of the case back here. There's nothing for drain back on a lot of these cases for your rear main seal. So let me show you how we're going to solve that. I like to do it on this particular side because this is the side that I normally put the sealant on before putting both of them back together. So your rear main seal actually sits right down here in this groove. All right, let's try that again. So again, there's nothing here on a lot of the stock cases, and your drain back hole for your oiling is all the way here. So what usually happens is your case sits flat and your area back here behind your rear seal will fill up that full with oil before it drains back into the case. So if you actually look on a few other sites, there's some high-end engine builders that do this mod, and it's very simple. All you need is a fine file, and I'll show you exactly what we're going to do. All right, so back here in the back, Again, your seal sits down here. You want to keep some oil in there, but what I found that works best is if you take and run a groove right here down at a slight angle to help relieve that oil. Now, you don't have to go deep. You just need, I don't know, about a half a mil or so. Up top here, you need to run a groove also. Why would you need a groove up top? Well, you need air in to let the oil out. See, even my case, that is the aftermarket Alternator case that has the stroker blah 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 super case, actually has a drain back hole down through here. Problem is, it didn't have any vent up here. And you would think, oh, that's a vent right there, but problem is you need to get a little bit more air in there to let things properly drain out. Ever since I did that, I've never had a problem with a rear main oil leak since I've started doing these mods to the cases. So let me show you real quick how we do that. There you go. And that is only roughly that deep. There's really not, you don't need a whole lot. And we'll do the same up top here. And again, like as you saw me, I kind of rounded this a little bit, kind of rounded that a little bit, because you never want sharp edges on everything. So we'll do the same up top. And again, believe it or not, this little thing right here is going to help prevent rear main seal leaks on these Volkswagens tremendously. Because again, with the way that sits, your stock oil drain back holes all the way up here, now we have a little somewhere for it to seep. So after you shut your engine off, this is full of oil, comes down and sits that full all the time, and that's why a lot of times people have their seal seep on the back. So, you know, this isn't going to allow all the oil to go back when you're running. That's what that drain back hole's for. Leave that alone. This is for after you shut the motor down. It can slowly seep through and not seep out the other way. Now, I can't take credit for this. You know, I didn't come up with this modification. There's actually, we all know him if you're in the Volkswagen community, Viper 76 Romeo or whatever his name is. He's the one that sent me the video that actually Jake Raby, who builds a crap ton of high performance Type 4 engines. Yeah, go check out that video. I think it's on Facebook. Jake Raby's mostly on Facebook. He has a video of this as well, explaining everything in detail. Again, I've done now 4 or 5 of them. Not one has seeped at all. To me, it's worth a little 5 minutes to do. Off camera, we went ahead and got the case all cleaned up. I go through and wire brush all the threads on everything. I taped the threads off on the head studs. Went ahead and painted the case. I know that's controversial. You do you, I'll do me. But before I painted it up, I went ahead and degreased everything real well, of course, with my favorite degreaser, Super Clean. This is something that, you know, I know it's on YouTube a lot. People are like, oh, Super Clean, Super Clean. This stuff really freaking works. Super Clean works amazing. I use it on my barbecue grill. I use it on engines, transmissions. I use it on all kinds of stuff. This stuff is very versatile. They don't even pay me to say this. I just love this stuff that much. And they like to work with me because, well, you guys are awesome. So, again, got everything nice and clean in the case via the Super Clean. And now we are ready to go ahead and start building the crank out. So if you remember, this was all just mock-up. So I'm going to go ahead and take everything apart, flush out the journals real well, go ahead and build the crank back, put our gears on, our bearings on, all that, and go ahead and today, I'm going to go ahead and get the short block built. That means there's a few other things that we need to go over via cam, oil pump, and stuff like that when it comes time to building your short block. So stay tuned. Let's dive into this. All right, we got our rods cleaned up, our crank cleaned up, all the journals flushed out multiple times. Those are all clean, everything's clean. So just like mock-up, We're gonna go ahead and assemble our rods with our bearings and go ahead and get all of our rods hung. So you got a tang and a tang on the bearing, and those go together just like so. Do the same thing on your rod cap, just like so. Make sure they're all the way in there. They feel good. I'll go ahead and lube that up. I like using the Permatex Ultra Slick with a little bit of 30 weight in it. Now again, you want to make sure with your bumps, have those corresponding to the proper side. Your bump goes up for the side that the rod hangs on for that cylinder. Now these little, got like a little washer on it. That washer needs to go down, and I'll show you why here in a little bit. All right, now on the rods, again, want your bump up, bump up, bump up, bump up. So that's pretty much how that goes, just like that. That's your rod orientation. So this is 3, this is 4, this is 1, and this is 2. So now that we got that squared away, again, like I said, if you put that washer down, if you notice right here, you've got a little indentation. So you use a small punch or something like that, actually take and peen that. It helps lock it in place. And that's really all there is to it. So next we need to go ahead and put our gears and our spacers on. So we have to put this bearing on first. If you remember, we marked our bearing beforehand. So all we need to do is just lube her up. Yeah, I know I usually use a little bit much, but there we go. Now, these two gears need to go get heated up so they can slide on. They're a press fit. So if you notice, there's no way. So we'll go ahead and get that cleaned up. This one looks really good. This is your distributor drive gear, and this is your timing gear. So we'll go ahead and get this squared away, get this set up. All right, got the gear heated up on the stove in the house. Don't tell my wife. Actually, she's gonna smell it, so it's fine. There we go, it's on. Now we'll take our spacer, put that on, and then we'll go get the other gear. Now the timing gear goes on, or the distributor gear goes on much easier. It's brass. There we go. Take a punch lightly, and make sure that it's seated. Now that we have the gears and the spacer on, we're going to put the snap ring on, and that just slides on. You heated those gears up, so the crank's going to be a little warm, so be careful. And that's it, gears are on. Now, one thing I like to do is I like to mark my timing marks so I can make sure that those are where they need to be. If you look right there, there's two little dots. I like to put paint on them just to make life a little easier when it comes time to setting your timing. Now we got that set, we've got our line pointing back. Throw some oil on that, let it go everywhere. Got our mark on that bearing. There we go. Now, we have our oil slinger, which the curve needs to point away. Put that on. Then we have our crank pulley woodruff key. And that just goes in there like that. And now we can use my fancy dancy little Utimus. We'll be able to use that to spin the engine over. Now we can move on to our cam and cam bearings, getting all that mocked up and set. So we'll go ahead and open up our new double thrust cam bearings. These have a thrust side on both sides. That one goes right here. And then you've got some narrow ones and some medium ones. Your narrow one goes back here. And then your medium sized one goes up here. Make sure you get the little tang in the groove. Now when you go and set your cam in place, one thing you want to watch is sometimes these double thrust bearings will actually pinch the journal right here. then we'll have to modify that. Way to test is drop it in, and I have no backlash whatsoever. Spins, but I don't have any backlash. Need a couple thou backlash. So what we need to do is we actually need to pop this cam bearing out. So I've got a piece of emery paper right here. This is a very flat surface on the bench. Hold it flat. I'm going to sand just a little bit off both sides, then try it again. Put the cam back in. Got a tad more that time, so just need to do it one more time. Third time's a charm. What do you think? There we go, a couple thousandths of play right there. That's pretty good. Now we need to do that to the other side of the case as well, so you don't have the same problem on the other side. We're looking good though, getting closer. Now something else a lot of people do not talk about, and I don't understand why, is your oil pump in relation to your cam. So like I said, we full flowed this case. This journal right here feeding into the engine we're going to be tapping that. So I have, this one here has an input but no output hole. What you want to do is take your oil pump, fit it to your case. And you're like, but why would you want to do that, Gary? Because a lot of the times your oil pump in an aftermarket cam will actually hit. And you want a little bit of clearance in between that. Or when the gear goes in, it doesn't go in all the way. So we actually have enough clearance on this one, but if you didn't have enough clearance and you had the typical bolt-on gear here, you'd want to clearance the bolts just a little bit. You can drop those down some, or you might have to clearance the boss here and make everything fit. I've had to clearance this boss, I've had to clearance this boss, I've had to do what you got to do to make it work. But because we're using a 26mm pump and a stock cam, we can spin it and everything moves nice, and we still have some clearance in there. So we don't have to worry about that hitting. So speaking of this oil port being tapped for full flow, let's go ahead and get that done now before we forget. So I'm just going to use a little bit of blue Loctite on the plug to help seal it, hold it in place. It's not going to go anywhere, but you never know. And it's not like with blue Loctite we can't take it back out later, because it's only blue Loctite. We've already verified that this slides down in, or recesses far enough in there. That's all part of our case prep. And just snug it up, that's all you need to do. Yep, still below, we're good. So in your typical gasket kit, you'll get a bunch of metal gaskets, rubber gaskets, paper gaskets, pushrod tube seals, oil pan gaskets, or sump I should say. You'll get your crush washers for your sump, valve covers. Some of them even come with the L-ring main seal. You will not use every gasket in this case. Not all of these are prudent. You've got different oil cooler seals. It's kind of like a generic, right? So you won't use all these. You got single port and dual port tins in there. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and open this up, get our case stud O-rings out, and get those installed. Now we got our lifters, and these are the old set of lifters that came with that cam. What you do is you can actually take, and if they are not, they're supposed to be convex, not concave. So if you put them together, they should slightly rock, and they do. When I marked these, before I pulled them out of the old case, I marked them. There's 4 exhaust, 4 intake, so I know where they go. Your exhausts are always on the outside, your intakes are always on the inside. Throw a little oil on them, drop it down in, make sure she nice and smooth, rotates. There we go. Same thing with the intake. Nice and smooth. So those are done. It's a good thing I marked those a long time ago. All right, lifters are done. Before I forget, some people like to do oiling mods on these lifters, where in between these 2 grooves on that flat part right there, they'll actually cut a line with like a Dremel. And they'll do that on like 2 sides to help oil flow in between on a higher lift cam. This being a stock case, not worried about it, we're not doing it. Stock lifter, stock cam, we'll be fine. Now something else I'm going to do, even though these lifters are matched to that cam, we don't have to do this, but I am going to go ahead and throw some braking grease on the cam lifters. This is something I probably don't have to do, but you know what, doesn't hurt. Whatever you do, even though this says engine assembly grease, critical break-in protection for internal engine components. Do not use this on your bearings. Do not. Big no-no. You don't have to put this on the cam since you're putting it on the lifter. Some people like to put it on the cam, not the lifter. Some people like to put it on both. You do you. I'm just kind of showing you what I do. That's it. We'll do the other side of the case and that'll be done. Go ahead and oil up our split bearing real quick. We're ready to go ahead and drop this crank into place. Right, now we just need to line up our marks. And these things are already wearing off. We are far off. Ooh, now that feels good. All right, we're there. Now, remember those 2 marks we made up here? So we'll bring this around slowly, easily. There we go. We got our 2 marks. Now our cam has 1 mark. And if you notice right there, our 1 mark is in between our 2. So we are properly timed. Now, one thing I suggest you do, there's some oil down on the gears. Also make sure you oil your cam bearings. It's going to be difficult, but you need to make sure that cam gear does not jump out. And it's not. It's staying put, which is good. That means that cam gear meshes with the crank gear. Excellent. Take our bearing, half bearing one more time. Yep, nice and tight. We're ready for assembly. I've got my half bearing installed, lubed up, cam bearings in, lubed up, lifters in, lubed up. Take a little bit of brake clean, clean your mating surface here. What I like to use is the Yamabond Motorsports 4, just a thin layer all the way around. It does a really good job sealing up. Don't need much, thin layer. When you get back here to the back, watch your little vents that you made. And I like to go ahead right now and put a thin layer right here where your cam plug goes. Speaking of cam plug, let's go ahead and get that installed on the other side. So your cam plug goes right here. I like to put this facing in with that facing out. Just drops in right there. So what we'll do is we'll take, this side is also cleaned up. This side of the case, I should say. Again, flat side in. Right there. Little extra goo right there in the corners. All right, we've got everything squared away. Everything's locked down where it needs to be. We have our lifter clips in to hold the lifters on this side. O-rings on the studs. Everything glued in. Time for marriage. Well, let's stand the rods up first. There we go. Now that we have the case together, we're going to go ahead and pull our lifter clips out of this side. Now, something I like to do is you've got your case half washers. Flat side goes down, rounded side goes up. That's what I do. And I also put a thin layer of RTV on the back. Precautionary. You do you. I'll do me. We'll go ahead and start running this down a little bit. Make sure she still spins nice. She does. All right. Very nice. Now we'll go ahead and go to final torque. Research your numbers. Here's the question. Will she turn? Oh yeah. She turns very nice. Perfect. The only thing left is all of our perimeter 13mm hardware. Oh, there's none back here. I don't know why I'm pointing over there. Up here, around the front, around the back. Now, these two here, I recommend putting a little bit of sealant on those washers because it's right there by the cam journal. So same thing, got your hardware, and just a wee little bit, drop her down. Same thing with this one here. The only two you need to do. Unanimous. We'll go ahead and get those two torqued down, and then we'll go ahead and just knock out the rest. All right, now it's just perimeter hardware. All right, oil pump time. So I did not tighten down this case little perimeter stud or this one here. Left those loose so I could tap in the oil pump. Now again, this is a full flow style oil pump, so I have an inlet hole, no outlet hole, and we blocked it here. It's already tapped off. Now one thing I like to do is down here, I like to radius this over a little bit. That way the oil coming in doesn't have a hard 90 to get to that gear. Your oil pump should come with 2 gaskets, or your oil pump kit comes with 2 gaskets. A thicker one and a thinner one. The thinner one goes on the cover. So we need to, like to use just a little bit of sealant. Again, a little bit goes a long way. Just a thin film. Make sure we're clean on the inside. Set our gasket on. We'll do the same thing to the back side of the pump, just a real thin film right along the edge there. All right, we got our little dab on there. Input hole, input hole. We'll go ahead and drop in our gear. Drop in our gear. All right, so we got a little bit of grease thrown in there. This is also controversial. Super thin layer around the edge. Again, you do you. Now the super thin gasket, and now our cover. Again, I'm going to put a super thin layer on our cover here. Now I hope I have enough stud sticking out. God grief, that's going to be tight. It is brutally hot, and we've done a lot. So, the recap: case is together, oil pumps in, oil pump covers on. These are 3/8 NTP to 8 AN, and I've got a little cap on there to keep debris out. Now, we'll go over the lines when we go to, later down the road, but they're not your typical AN lines, if you will. Just think of budget friendly. We did this on the 60. Got this idea back when that 2054 was in Jawbreaker. Oil pressure sensors in. Really the only thing left to do on the short block is sump and our oil relief plug. So we'll go ahead and knock that out after a short break. All right, you got your 2 oil reliefs. Your plunger goes in. We'll throw a little oil in, lube her up. That'll drop right down. Long spring goes in, and your back one goes back here. Same thing, we'll lube it up a little bit. Plunger, and short spring goes back here. Sorry about that, my camera shut off from the heat out here today. It's hot. So, got it buttoned up, got our little dipstick on. Underneath, we got our sump cover on with our screen. We are running a screen. And then these right here, I love so much better than the stock style with the little flathead. You can actually pick these up from CP Performance or CIP1. I got these from CIP1. They're hex head, and they're also 1/4 inch inside, so you can use like a 1/4 inch drive or a wrench. Works great. Short block is buttoned up. So I'll go ahead and tape everything off and then probably bag it. And then next video, we'll dive into checking out the heads, deck height, compression ratio, valve geometry, all that fun stuff to button up the long block. So that'll be another long video. Bear with us. There's a lot of information here in these engine builds. Oh, before I forget, the Teflon tape that I used is actually yellow. It's not white. Yellow Teflon tape is actually fuel and oil resistant. So now you know.
So if you remember me talking a while back, I actually gave a set of heads that I had to a young guy that was trying to keep his bug on the road. And long story short, I ended up getting his troubled heads that was giving him problems. These are some heads from AA Performance. They are a stock replacement head. They're nothing fancy. They're not a 501 series or anything like that. They're just stock valve, stock replacement set of heads, which are a good head. But he was having issues with it. So I figured, you know what? Take my heads down the road. I'll get those heads from you whenever I'm ready to build an engine. And well, now we're ready to build an engine. So I had to get these heads cleaned up. So what did I do? Went over to my buddy's shop, borrowed his media blaster, got these heads all cleaned up, ready to start inspecting. And then I had VW Darrin reach out to me. Yeah, you guys know VW Darrin. Hell of an awesome, great guy. He reached out and said, man, bring him over. Let's really go through these things and find out what's going on and rework these heads. So that's what we did. He decided that he wanted to go ahead and vapor blast them a little bit to get them even better looking than what I had them with. You know, Darrin doesn't do anything but top quality. So he wanted to make sure they were perfect. I don't blame him. And I appreciate that from him. So from there, went ahead and did a full port of the heads and really cleaned everything up. Then took a cartridge roll to it and smoothed everything out. Now the one thing you don't want to do is when you're porting heads and cartridge rolling and all that, you don't want these ports super smooth. You want just a little bit of roughness to it so it keeps the fuel in suspension and doesn't puddle things up. Something I learned from Darrin. I didn't know that, and I never claimed to know everything. Then from there we found out that we had some bad valve guides, so both heads needed intake valve guides. Exhaust guides were good, but the intakes on both heads were bad. So then from there, we went ahead and replaced all the valves, refaced the valves for a true 45-degree angle on the valve itself. Then we did a complete true 3-angle valve job on the valve seats with a 30, 45, and 60-degree cut. From there, we lapped in the valves, reassembled the heads with new HD single springs, and that's where we're at now. Everything is squared away, ready to go. Dicom's still in there, but we've got new stainless valves, stock intakes, but definitely new exhaust valves. Again, ports are all cleaned up. And on the port itself, on the exhaust port, you really only want to take care of this upper ledge here. You really don't want to open it up anymore or oval it out or anything like that. It's just this one turn right here that you really want to work on. Same with porting the intake. You want to clean it out up top here and just kind of get it to flow a little nicer that way. You're just wanting to take care of and get rid of any sharp bends, right? So things flow. I really cannot thank Darrin enough. You know, we didn't record. He spent all freaking day working on these heads for me, and I can't thank him enough. I really can't, you know. It's awesome to see VW people take care of other VW people, right? Put good things out, you get good things in return. So Darrin, thank you, seriously. All right, moving on. So one thing I like to do before we get started is I like to take just a regular paint pen and mark my heads 1, 2, 3, and 4. Do the same thing with the jugs. So you got 1 paint dot, 2, 3, and 4. Now if you look closely here, you'll see an arrow. Can you see that? And it's difficult. So I like to go and put a line on it so I know exactly which way this goes without having to search too much, if that makes sense. Now one thing I get asked a lot lately is, Gary, are there head gaskets in between the jug and the head?
And no, Volkswagen did not do this on the Type 1 engine. So this is another reason why you mark cylinder 1, cylinder 1. Is we're going to take a little bit of valve grinding compound and lap the jug into the head to make sure we have a perfect seal all the way around. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick. Let's toss a little bit of the valve grinding compound onto the edge of the cylinder here. Don't need a lot, just a little bit goes a long way. And we'll drop the head into the spot. Clean it up real quick. And what you're going to see is an even ring all the way around. But what I mean by that even ring, you notice there's no gaps. It's an even ring all the way around. And that's how we know that we're going to get a perfectly good seal on that cylinder. So all we need to do, we got cylinder 1 done. Now we take cylinder 2 and do the same thing on number 2. And same thing, we've got a nice even gap, or a nice even sand basically all the way around, or we know that's going to seal. I'll do the other head and I'll bring you back. Now that we got that stuff cleaned up, sorted out, we need to CC the heads so we can start on our compression ratio for the engine. Step 1 that we're going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and again CC the head. We need to find out how much combustion is in here, what size this is. In order to do that, they sell a little kit with syringe, different size discs. Some people want to drop the disc in. Some people like to go and put grease or Vaseline or something around the edge to seal it. I just kind of plop it in there and hold it in place. Here, I'll show you. Make sure you have a spark plug in there, because if not, you've got a leak. And now that I grabbed the right size disc, pop that in there. Take your syringe, bottom line to the 60. I just use water. You use whatever you want. And start squeezing her in there. Alright, there we go. No air pocket. Little doohickey is just to the bottom. It's full. And this is out. That means that's 60 milliliters that went in there, which means this combustion chamber is 60 cc's. Now you want to verify that on all 4 to make sure that you're the same. And I've already done that off camera. So we know that these combustion chambers are 60 cc. That's going to be good for us, and I'll show you why. Alright, we've got 1 piston cylinder mocked up. I'm going to go ahead and drop that down in place. No, we don't have the clips in it. We're just setting it down to do deck height. Now let's go ahead and push this down in place. We want that to seat in the case just like that. And now we'll go ahead and start measuring for deck height. Now in order to measure deck height, which is the difference between the top of the piston and the top of the cylinder here, you want a minimum 40 thousandths with the piston down 40 thousandths. So you don't accidentally get piston to valve slap if something goes awry. So they have these tools, slap on there. You don't have to put all 4, just run 2 of them, and you don't have to torque them, just run them down snug, because all you want to do is make sure you hold this piston down. And that's it. Now, in order to get that measurement, we need to rotate the crank just a little bit. I got a negative deck height. I'm coming up and hitting. Interesting. It just barely sticks up above. So what do we need to do? We need to figure that out. So one way we could do that is with some feeler gauges and a straight edge. So I think we'll start off with 10 thou. That sucks. I can get that through there. Alright, so that's way too much. So we're right about 20 thou out of the hole. And boys and girls, that's why you measure things and don't assume. You need to know what your numbers are. Sure, slap it together and cross your fingers and hope for the best. If you want reliability and you want things to be right, measure them. I had some cylinder shims here, which basically, you can use a combination of them, stack them, and they go in between the case and the cylinder to raise the cylinder up so the piston goes further down the cylinder. But I have the wrong combination there since we are 20,000 outside the cylinder. So I need to order some cylinder shims and get this set right. Now, one thing you can do, and I actually had several people go, that's not a 74 millimeter stroke crank. Now that it's mocked up, let's check it out. Because I think you might be right, but not like you think. Hang tight. So we'll go ahead and drop that cylinder all the way down the bottom dead center, right? Rotate it, make sure our cylinder's down, and drop a measurement. Now, we come up with 2.873 inches. Well, don't we need to add 20 thousandths because it was out of the cylinder by 20 thousandths? Because we're measuring from the top of the cylinder, right? So let's add, there we go. Now, let's convert that to metric. 73.52 millimeter stroke. So you're right, it's not a 74, it's a 73.5. Close enough for government work. Now, let's go to CB Performance's website and figure out compression. So we can say our engine bore, we know, is 87 millimeter. Our stroke, 73.5. Deck height, that's what we're trying to figure out. Combustion chamber CC, we know, is a 60cc. Let's just say we want to shoot for a 7.5 to 1 compression ratio. We can click the deck height button, and we need to be at 48 thousandths. Nice. It's actually a 1748cc, not a 1760. Close enough for government work. So, what does that mean? It means we need a 48 thousandth shim, but they don't make 48 thousandths. Oh, we also need, we're plus 20. So technically, we need that to be 68 thousandths. They don't make that. It's okay, just get it as close as you can. A couple of thousandths here and there is really not going to matter. But, let me show you this. I'm going to order 60 thou shims. And here's why. Here's a 40 thousand. Okay? Can you see that? It's about 37. So that 40 is not even 40, it's 37. Here's a 10. What's a 10 measure at? Actually, a 10 measures right around 10.5 to 11. So what does that mean? It means if we order the 60 thou, which would give us 40 thou, use this, should give us right around, hopefully 50, but we'll have to measure the 60s to find out. So I was hoping to fully get, the top end together today. Obviously, that's not happening now. So again, I'll go ahead and order the correct shims, get those put in. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do, and we'll probably do it off camera because, you really don't need to see how it's done, is I've got a hone here, and I'll use this and run it in the cylinders to kind of clean the cylinders up. Because again, these are all used. We're doing everything used parts, except for like the bearings, push rod tubes, gland nut, things of that nature. I mean, I've got a used flywheel. I've used clutch. I've used pretty much everything. Carburetor, intake. Trying to do this to show you guys you don't have to go out and spend $10,000 on all brand new parts to have an engine. Parts are within spec. You can run them. Actually, let me put this together real quick and I'll show you how to hone a quick cylinder real fast. All right, just wipe your cylinder out real well. We'll take a little bit of 30 weight oil or whatever weight you have. Lube up those cylinders. Next, we'll take our hone, plop it in there. You don't want to go fast, and you want to move it in to try to get like a 45 to 60 degree hatch. Okay, so spin it not real fast and just work it back and forth. Take another clean rag, check it out. As you notice now, we've got a nice crosshatch in that. What that's going to do is help everything seal up better. So that's it. Just need to do that 3 more times and that'll pretty much be done. We can go ahead and assemble our pistons and cylinders at least. So I went ahead and wiped them out real good with brake clean after honing it. So just remember, The flat side of the cylinder goes to inside of the case because the two butt up against each other, and your arrow points towards the flywheel. So what we need to do is, I've got some clean hands, put a little bit of oil, doesn't take much, just a little bit, lube that cylinder up nice. You don't want it going together dry. Take your rings. This is cylinder 1, which I actually put that at the bottom, so that's going to go towards the back. So that would be top. What we need to do is take the gap on our oil control ring, put that at top. I like to put this ring over about 10 o'clock, and then your top ring over right around 2 o'clock, or 1 o'clock I should say, so like 10, 11 o'clock, 1, 2 o'clock, somewhere in there, because you want them staggered. You don't want those two up against each other, because then you're going to lose some compression. Drop that in there, take our little band clamp, bring it up just a little bit, pinch it together. There we go. That one is done. Just tap it out slowly until you get the wrist pin area just visible, and you're done. Then you can put your clip in the one side, put your wrist pin in, and she's pretty much ready to assemble as soon as we get the spacers. See right there, it stopped. Don't keep going because you don't have all your rings in all the way. You don't want to break a ring. And there we go. All 4 cylinders are completely assembled, ready to go. Now another way you can do this, you don't have to do it this way, is you can go ahead and put the piston on the rod and then put your band clamp around and try to slide your jug over. That's another way. I've done it that way. I find this way easier. Pick what works for you and do that, as long as you end up with the same end result. And we're back with the proper shims this time. So let's go ahead and dive into mocking things up and checking things out. But first I want to talk about a couple quick things. One, I did already take care of ring gap on these previously on the cylinders. So the ring gap, what you do is you want to take a ring off, put it in the cylinder itself off of the piston, and verify the gap in between. You want to do that on all 3 rings, your upper, middle compression rings, and then also your lower oil control ring. Another thing that I did is you can actually take the piston without the rings on it and actually weigh your pistons and get them all within about a half a gram. You can kind of go down in here a little bit and take a little bit off to kind of help balance out your pistons. Now I also did the same thing with the rods. I did that off camera before, I checked them and forgot to hit record. But what I do is I put them in the vise and I weigh them horizontally, right? So you want to weigh that on the big end and the small end, and basically you can get them really close as well doing the same thing. So now that we have that covered, let's go ahead and show you what we have to do, unfortunately, with these cylinder shims. So as you see, we've got them in a stacks of 4 here. Unfortunately, we're going to have to go with 3 total shims just because of, you know, what's available, what we're doing here with this engine. So unfortunately, we got to use 3 shims, but it is what it is. We just a little silicone in between. I'll show you that when we go to actually do final assembly. But again, this is just mock-up. So we need to go ahead and double check our compression height now that we have the proper shims. So let's dive into that, shall we? We've got our shims on. You can put those on before you put the wrist pin through, or else you won't be able to get your shims on. So we've got cylinder 2 here. We'll go ahead and get that set in place. Now we'll go ahead and rock this over to exactly top dead center. We'll We'll take our feeler gauges and I'll run that in there, and that's exactly where I want it to be. Nice. Those go in and out quite nicely, not too tight. And that is a 25, a 20, and a 6, so we're at 51 thousandths of deck, and again, you need a minimum of 40. I could do away with one of those shims, but that'd be putting me really tight at 40, and I don't really want to be there. So let's go ahead and do the math real quick. All right, so again, we have an 87 millimeter stroke, or 87 millimeter piston, 73.5 stroke. We have 51 thousandths of deck, 60cc head. Where are we at? 7.5 to 1. I'll take it. That'll be a good runner.
So now that our deck height is set, we can go ahead and move on to rocker arm geometry, which we need to go ahead and mock up ahead without the pushrod tubes. Again, remember, this is mock-up. We don't have the
clips in for the wrist pins. We have no sealant. We're just mocking up because we want to verify everything here. So we'll go ahead and remove this, set a head on there, torque a head down, and then yeah, put some rockers on there and start checking rocker arm geometry. And of course, you want to double check your deck height on the other side also. We're on the 1-2 side right now. You want to check it on the 3-4 side, because something can be off in your case. I've actually seen it where you've needed to have different shims on one side of the case and the other side of the case in order to keep your deck height the same. If it's off by a thou, thou and a half, 2 thou, it's really not going to make that big of a difference. You're off more than that, something, your case has been decked or something's been done and you need to correct it. So do what you got to do to make things right. Again, this is why we mock things up. Enough jibber jabber. Let's get crack-a-lacking and move on. All right, so I've got a stock push rod for mock-up, and I've also got a adjustable push rod. You can get these pretty much anywhere. You can make them, but we're going to drop one of each down in there so we can check both. And now that we have that set up, we need to go ahead and rotate the engine and measure our half lift. So first we need to get our total lift. So slowly rotate that over. 1, 2. Oh, right around 300 thousandths lift. So we back that up to 150. That'll be our half lift. So we're back to 0. Valve is closed. 150. So now we'll go ahead and move this out of the way, so that way we can kind of take a look here and see what we're seeing. So it might be kind of hard to tell. This is just my piece of angle iron that I bolt to the exhaust studs to be able to check our dialing indicator to. So what you're looking for is tip of the valve and back here to be about level. We put a straight edge on that and look down. Believe it or not, we're really close. I'm honestly not real mad at that at all. It's almost perfect. The push rods could tend to be just a tick longer. I don't know if it's really worth just that little bit more in doing custom push rods. I really don't know. Oh, real quick, this is the piece of angle iron that I have cut. So I've got a little notch in back there, so you can actually just drop that in place, and 2 nuts, tighten up to 2 nuts, that holds it on, and that gives you a nice mounting surface for your magnetic dial gauge. Nothing fancy. It's like a $35 tool off Amazon. Go Amazon. Hoo-hoo. So I'm gonna ponder some more on that, but I think I'm gonna run it.
I'm all about doing things right. I really don't want to go buy chromoly push rods and cut to length just to go that much more. And money I don't really have for this. So I think we'll just go ahead and run stock length push rods for the time being. We can always revisit this later. But again, it's right there. It's so stinking close. I think I'm just going to go ahead and go with it. But
we are going to have to, these are solid rocker shafts. And these are just a set I bought used. This one here is a little tight. This one here, that's good. This one here is pretty snug. Oh, I got to push it out, duh. This one here has got a gap. So we got to fix all this. So we'll tear this apart later and do all that. The whole reason you want to do your valve geometry, right, and verify all this is because of two reasons. One, you change the camshaft. It's a good idea. I mean, if this is a stock engine and this is all a complete stock rebuild, you pretty much don't have to do this. Engineers already figured it out for you. But whenever you go and change your piston cylinders for a bigger size, and then you have to put in some head shims or cylinder shims, or you're going to use the little copper head gasket, deck things, you fly cut the heads, all that changes this. So what you want to do is you need to verify your rocker arm geometry. If this was way off, it's going to put way too much preload on your valve guides and wear these things out. Well, this let's say it was way off and I just put it together. Would it run? Absolutely. It's going to run. It's going to run great. How long is it going to live? Talk to me in 10, 20,000 miles. That's where the difference comes in. You want the longevity, right? You want things to last. Who wants to keep dumping money into their stuff every 10, 20, 30,000 miles? I don't. I want to build things to last. Look at that 2054. That thing's 4.5 years old, got 12, 13,000 on it, 15,000 on it, still runs like a top, no issues. Build it right once and move on. So why solid rocker shafts over the stock? The stock has the little clips on the end, and solid rocker shafts have a bolt. Those little clips can come off. Instead of shimming it with multiple shims to get everything right, you got wavy washers, those can break. This is not needed with a stock setup, okay? But as soon as you put heavy single duty springs or dual valve springs, ixnay from the stock. If you're running everything stock, stock is fine. If you run heavy duty valve springs, upgrade. It's simple, it really is. Oh, and one other thing, again, this is mock-up. These little nylock nuts that come in the rebuild kits and stuff like that, do not use these for your rocker arms, okay? These are actually pretty soft material. So if you don't have a stock nut to go on here, I'm gonna tell you a little something, little secret. As soon as you start going up and putting ratio rockers on here, 1.25s, 1.3s, 1.4s, 1.5s, the easiest thing to do is you can actually run a head stud nut. It's the same diameter. These right here, these are actually a 10 mil, but if you have 8mm head studs, that's the same diameter as that. So you can actually run, hold on, let me show you. So you still put your factory wavy washer underneath, but there you go, that is a 10 or an 8mm head stud nut, and it'll go right on there. This is a harder material than the little nylock nuts that come with the kits. So literally, right there, easy upgrade. Screws right on. Now, unfortunately, instead of being 13mm, the outside's 15mm. Doesn't matter. You're gonna get better clamping force and a stronger nut, keep from getting that pulled. Trust me, ask me how I know. That 2054, yeah, I was like, oh, those little nylocks look pretty. Let me put those on the rockers. With an FK8 cam, 1:4:1 rockers. Yeah, that thing lasted about 50 miles till I jumped on it real hard, and the entire rocker arm assembly, yep, studs were fine. The nuts stripped. Don't run nylock nuts on your rocker arms. I don't care if it's stock or not. Don't use them. All right, now that we have our #1 piston sitting here, everything's clocked, ready to go. Remember, the flat side here is the inside, faces the other cylinder. So we want to go and put our wrist pin retainer, I call them Jesus clips, because when they fly you go, oh Jesus! On these clips, there's a kind of a rounded side and then a sharp side. I like to put the sharp side out so it really sits heavy in that groove. So get yourself a good set of split ring pliers. Oh, there we go. I felt it click. And now that it's in place, if you notice, you can spin it, you can rotate it. So we are in place. So now that we're in place, we don't want to put our wrist pin in yet because we need to get the shims on. So take yourself a rag, some brake cleaner, clean up your surfaces really well on the cylinder base and also on the case itself. I also like to wipe down my shims to make sure that there's no oil on those. Again, kind of stinks we got to do 3, but it is what it is. You just want to make sure you get all the oils off so your sealant of choice sticks properly. Now, I prefer to use ultra black silicone. You use whatever your little heart desires. A thin bead around, nothing crazy. Yes, that's a goop right there, but I want to get that clunk out of there. And we'll go ahead and set one down in place. Run a very thin bead. All right, we're good there. I like to put a thicker, thinner, and then a thicker again, because these little ones right here like to tend to bend a little easy. And I am literally wiping as much as I can away, just giving a slight little bit right there. And do the same thing again. This can be a little fatter if you like. Make sure we got a nice even bead all the way around. Now we're going to put a wrist pin in and go ahead and assemble it onto the engine. Just make sure that you give yourself a little oil on the wrist pin, lube it up a little bit, helps it slide in a little easier. Now remember, wrist pins on this side, the inside, the flat side. So we need to make sure that we do the wrist pin on the other side because we're not mocking up anymore. Then we go ahead and take our clip, and remember, sharp side out towards us. If you want to throw a paper towel or something down in there to keep it from dropping it, that's up to you. And you should be able to take it and rotate it if it is in all the way. Another thing you can do, take a little screwdriver and just tap, tap, tap it. Make sure it's home. You don't want that coming out. Oh, she's spinning nice, she's rotating. So now, let's go ahead and push this all the way down to its home. There we go. Now to do the other. Now something else to remember, make sure you do not forget your cylinder deflector that goes on the bottom before you put your head on. And this side's kind of a pain in the butt because your case studs. These two shorter ones go towards the bottom, these two longer ones go up towards the top through that last fin. I like to kind of start that one there. Let's go over something real quick. Remember, cylinder 2, cylinder 1, cylinder 2, cylinder 1, and we got our arrows pointing towards the flywheel. Well, where the flywheel will live anyway. So make sure you have your everything in orientation the way it's supposed to be. Again, this is all part of mock-up. Cylinder deflectors in there. Now let's talk about pushrod tubes. Gary, where'd you get the black ones? These are regular pushrod tubes. I paint them black just to help them live a little longer. It's a thin coat. It's the same thing as what I used on this. Now, one of the things I like to do is I'll take a 13mm socket and kind of just stretch these out just a tad, and that way when everything sits down on the case and the heads, these collapse a little bit and makes them, I actually have better luck. The seals that go on those, I do not like to put sealant on them. I put a real thin film of oil on them and put them in place. I don't have them leak. The other thing is these actually have a seam on them, and you want that seam to go up towards the cylinder. So if that seam were to leak, it's facing up, not facing down or sideways or whatever. But you're probably thinking, how in the world can you see the seam if you paint them? Look inside. It's right there. You see that? It's right up top right there. Discoloration, there's your seam. Just drop that in place once we get everything on there. And we'll go ahead and drop the head in place and get this side buttoned up. All right, so again, pushrod tubes, 13mm socket on an extension, kind of grab, put it in probably about that far, not far, and just give her a little tug all the way around, make it straight. That's going to help stretch it out a tad. Let's do that on all four. Now that we've got those stretched out, again, just a little bit of oil on them, on both sides. set it in place. Now we're ready for our head. Now remember, you have it marked cylinder 1, cylinder 2. That worked well. Kind of forgot. Whoops, whatever. Now you can also take that same 13mm and kind of just make sure that it's centered up real nice. Don't drop it down in there, you'll have a bad day. Well, not really a bad day, you'll just have to take everything back apart. So now that we have that squared away, I'm going to start putting our hardwire on. Now the 4 inner ones here, because those are inside the head, I like to put just a little bit of sealant on the back of these. Helps ensure we have a good seal, hopefully no leaks. I've never had a leak doing it this way. Again, real thin layer, nothing much. Now your initial torque sequence, I'll put a chart up. You're going to run the centers in first, then the outers, and then you'll crisscross. So we'll just use the impact, just kind of bring everything down. I like to run a light one in the first pass. Then we'll go ahead and go up to final torque and do our crisscross. All right, that head's on. Now again, if you want, you can take your socket, kind of just make sure that pushrod tube's nice and centered, and we're good. Well, we got the 1-2 side fully done. Again, pushrod tubes are on. Cylinder deflector's on, everything's torqued down. So I'll go ahead and flip this over, do the other side off camera, and we'll go ahead and get to moving on to the next little bit. Get this long block finished up today. Hopefully, time's ticking away. Getting hot out here, I had to put the camera in the fridge for a little bit. So now that we have the long block pretty much assembled except for rocker arms, I'm gonna go ahead and get the distributor in place. Now you need to make sure that you have 2 shims that go in between the bottom of the distributor drive gear and the case. Those 2 shims you can pick up at like AA Performance and CB Performance, stuff like that, so you can pick those up. Now we're gonna need to go ahead, you don't need to use the distributor drive gear tool. I find it easier for setting it in place. Some people just use pliers or whatever. Now I like to use a little bit of assembly lube on the 2 shims on a screwdriver. So I just drizzle a little bit of that down in there. Put a little bit on your 2 shims. Again, this just kind of helps them stick together. Slide that on your long screwdriver and drop those down in there. So we'll go ahead and drop this in. Again, kind of pointing towards that 1 fuel pump stud. We're going to drop our distributor in. Now we need to put a little oil on the O-ring. And just like that, camera dying and all, distributor is in. So again, when you aim it right to here and drop it down, it should go pretty much straight. That gets you dropped exactly where you need to be. Now you can pull it out, rotate it again. That tool helps a lot. So we'll go ahead and let this charge for a second. We'll go ahead and do our in play and get that done. All right, we have our flywheel on with no shims, no seal, no nothing. So we need to go ahead and see, we got it at 0. And that comes out to 50. 0, actually about 49. So what we need to do now is go ahead and pull our flywheel back off and put 3 shims back there, and then we'll mock it back up and see what we got. We got our 3 shims. Put those in place. And on an 8-dial flywheel, I like to put a mark top dead center. Matches with the case, helps make it easier to get dials all lined up. That's a little too tight. We've got about 2 thousandths. So we need to do another combination of shims in order to get that correct. All right, 3rd time's the charm. So get that set. All right, we're 0. Setting right about 4th thou. So we go to 3 and negative, yeah. So we're right at 4th thou, which should be good. Bada bing, bada boom. Now with our shims still in place, all 3 shims, we'll go ahead and put in our rear main seal, front main seal. Now I like to recess it some, so we'll take another seal and tap it. So this is an old seal. And there we go, it's all the way in. Now you want to take some, and you want to lube this up because you don't want it to start dry. I take just a thin film of grease, run that grease around that lip. It's not going to run off like oil will. Now also on the back of the flywheel you have an O-ring right here. And that needs to be cleaned out real well. And a new fresh O-ring that comes in your engine kit, that needs to go in there. And that we can stick a little bit of the assembly lube on it. Again, you don't want everything dry. And even though we have the grease on the other side, run just a little bit of that assembly lube around just to make sure everything's nice and coated, nice and lubricated. Clean up our mess. All right, she's ready to install. So again, that mark comes in handy. Get your flywheel lined up, gland nut, flywheel lock, just set it in place. You don't have to bolt it down. And we'll go ahead and draw that in. Little something I like to do to remember, piece of tape, torque me. I can admit when I'm wrong and when I screw up, and well, it's my fault we blew it up. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start off with the oil cooler, an oil cooler doghouse adapter. So this is a doghouse fan, I'll show you why. We've got our pack of O-rings, we've got our gaskets, our metal gaskets, alternator stand, and of course our fuel pump assembly. So we're gonna go ahead and get all of that on top of the engine and go ahead and drop on our other head tin, and then we'll go from there. All right, to put your oil cooler on, you're gonna have a couple different O-rings in here, or O-rings, gaskets, whatever you wanna call them. You got a couple different sizes. So you need to ensure that you're using the right one. So if you notice, this one here has a smaller hole in it than this one. So you don't wanna use this one. You should have 4 of this size. And that's the size we need to use for this particular oil cooler. So we'll go ahead and take our nuts off. Now all you're going to do is just drop that in place. Take our oil cooler, which was generously donated along with the oil cooler adapter. Believe it or not, some simple clean and some scrub brush, and that thing turned out beautiful. So you want to make sure that those sit right there in those holes, just like so. And all we need to do is just kind of snug it up. You don't crank them tight, you just snug them up. Again, you're not making it super tight, you're just snugging it up. Doesn't take a crap ton of pressure. And that's it. You now have that done. So now we'll go ahead and go drop these on the case and install our oil cooler. Same thing, we're going to drop those down in place. They sit in the hole flush. You don't have to force them in. And just drop your oil cooler in place. I do not recommend using nylock nuts, especially for these undersides. It's going to be a pain to get those tightened up. Ask me how I know. Take your washer, your nut. So if you were replacing oil cooler seals, this is how you'd be doing it. And again, with the head tin on this side, with that one on, it's pretty much impossible to get to them. You can, it's just easier this way. So pull your fan shroud, pull your head tin, and you'll be done. Now it's just a matter of snugging them up. They don't go much. I think book calls 5 foot-pounds. It's not much at all. So just a good snug is all you need. Finger snug those. And the same thing, about 5 foot-pounds. So just snugging it up good. Double check them, make sure you got them. That's it. Oil cooler is done. Let's move on. All right, next up, let's go ahead and get the fuel pump done. So we've got our Russell fuel pump. Comes with the gaskets. Make sure you get the proper fuel pump rod because there's 2 different lengths. One for alternator, one for generator. And of course, we've got our lovely little flange here that we need to use. So one thing I like to do is set this in the case and make sure it drops in and you don't have to force it. Because if you have to force it and remove this later, good luck, it's going to break off down below. So what we can do if we need to is sand this part right here a little bit. So let's swing it around, drop it in the case and see how it does. So we'll just drop this down in there. Yep, see, it's really tight. You don't want to do that. So you can take some sandpaper or something and you can see right there where it's rubbing. So we'll take and just kind of clean all that up some and then try it again. A little bit more. There we go. Drops right down in there nice. So now it's time to go ahead and clean some gaskets up and get to gluing. Alright, first gasket's got a little bit of sealant on it. Use your sealant of choice. I like black RTV. You do you. Then we've got a little bit on the bottom side of this. And I just realized the studs are not tall enough, so extract those studs out a little bit. Just take part of a paper towel, put it in there so we don't drop anything down in the hole, into the case. Thread on one nut, thread on a second nut. Now that it's double nutted, use the bottom one. And you can raise that up higher. So those studs are not long enough. I gotta look, see if we have different studs. Well, I should have checked that first, but it is what it is. So what we pulled out is a lot more of like a exhaust stud size. These are fuel pump studs. See how you got a big gap in between? So you run it into the case to about there, and then you've still got plenty of room for everything else. Oops, my bad. Again, if you double nut it, you can pull it out of there. So I'll go ahead and get the other one pulled, drop these in, and then we'll get back to the fuel pump. All right, studs are replaced. We've got the proper ones in now. Whoops. Replace the gasket because I kind of nicked it. Figured why not just replace it. Dig our little paper towel out of there. It's a good thing I put it there because I dropped a nut. We've got some sealant on the back side of our phenolic spacer here. Drop that down. Come on, get in the hole. There we go. Now I like to take a little bit of oil, put it on my rod, just so it helps lubricate, dropping down in. Boink. And I have no idea where I heard this from before, but if you take a little bit of grease and put it in there, it's supposed to help. I don't know. Sounds good. Now we'll take our other gasket, a little bit of sealant, drop that down in place. There we go. Now we can take our fuel pump with a little bit of sealant on it and drop it down in place as well. Now we'll just kind of push it down a little bit, get a washer on there, get a nut on there. Same thing on the back side. Washer in a nut. I'm using nylocks, use whatever you want. Stainless nylock, so they're not the soft ones that come in the engine kit case. Then again, not that big of a deal on this. You're not having high pressure, a lot of force or anything. All right, now we'll just take a wrench and snug her on up. Doesn't have to be tight, just snug. There we go, fuel pump's done. So now we'll go ahead and move on to the alternator stand. All right, for alternator stand, it's actually pretty simple. We're gonna have one gasket, sealant of choice, face down. Now we have our oil deflector plate. It goes on like that, with these parts facing down, and its openings are facing your head tin. All right, again, sealant of choice on the back. Then your other gasket, sealant of choice on the back of that one. And then your alternator or generator stand. And throw on some washers and our pretty nuts. What is it with e-bikes? People just riding around on e-bikes. It's like you're not getting any exercise. They're not even pedaling, they're just driving around on e-bikes. To each their own, I guess. Now you can just go ahead and snug it on up. I like to kind of crisscross a little bit. This back one over here, you're going to have to use a wrench on, but these other three, you can actually get a ratchet on. And just snug it. You don't need it super tight. And again, we'll throw a wrench on this one. All right, that's done. Woohoo! All right, might as well go ahead and throw the other head tin on. Get these head tins on at least. Get our wires out the way. Kind of just drops down over. Hold on, pull your spark plugs. Duh. Look at that, now it fits. I just have them kind of threaded in a few threads, just to keep stuff out, debris out. I like to pull them out when I go to turn it over and build oil pressure. I like using these button head style bolts. Use what you like. Well, that was pretty easy. We got our head tins on, oil cooler, fuel pump, alternator stand. So now I need to worry about fan shroud. I'll figure it out, don't worry, because I've already got the alternator and backing plate sitting there. Backing plate's already painted up. That's ready to go. We also have a fan for the alternator. Really, fan shroud, hope to have that sorted out this week. And then we can go ahead and get the fan shroud fixed up, painted, get that on, get the other stuff assembled. I've already got the intake, end castings, carburetor, coil. We're real close. Let me go find a fan shroud. I'll be right back. All right, I'm out here after work. Let's try to get a couple things done so we can get this cam break-in done even faster. Found the fan shroud. It's drying, so let's go ahead and assemble the fan onto the alternator so we can get all this assembled. So here we go. You've got your little funky wavy washer. You've got your hub and nut and a couple alternator shims. And that's what's going to hold your fan onto your alternator. So I'll set you up real quick and we'll knock that out. So just make sure you got your little keyway in right there. Take your hub, the square part is going to be facing out because that's what's going to lock into your fan. Sometimes the keyway likes to move, so just be careful. There it goes. Fan, actually, I usually have to put 1 or 2 shims back there to shim it. So we'll do that to start, then we'll put it on and see how she does. Put the wavy washer, put the curve like that out. Take your nut, and that's 36 millimeter, just like your gland nut. And then give it a couple ugga-duggas. That's it. Now we can go ahead and spin this, and it's not hitting on the backing plate. So we can go ahead and set it in the fan shroud and see if it hits on that. That's where your shims come into play to be able to adjust the fan back and forth. All right, we'll take our fan assembly, drop it in, line up your holes. Sounds like we're probably going to have to shim it some more. The only way to know for sure is to tighten it up. Set it up. Alright, maybe we just need 1 shim back there. So we'll go ahead and take this apart and remove 1 shim. Alright, well, with the shims removed, let's try it again. That's what I'm talking about. Alright, so I removed 1 shim on the inside, put it on the outside in between the fan and that big wavy washer, just to help take up the slack and helps keep everything nice and solid. So there we go. There we go, fan shroud is on. I forgot to hit record, my bad. Make sure you put your little nuts on both sides. Use an actual bolt, that way if you're running dual carburetors you can actually get to it. Don't use one of those pan head screws right there, regular 10 screws. Let's see, when you set it on, spin it, make sure that it's not rubbing, and then with these MST pulleys you can actually run a straight edge across it and verify that everything is nice and straight. Now with this tensioner, this is not one of the spring-loaded ones, so you actually have to tighten it right there. I think it's like a 6mm Allen. Thing is, that doesn't move. I like my belt a little loose. You don't want those real tight. They will ruin your alternator and also the front nose bearing on your case. So do not, for the love of God, make this super tight. This will slip less than a stock V-belt. That's why you want to run it a little loose. Ask me how I know. I've seen things. I've heard things. Let me bring you up to speed. I've got a lot done. We are this close. Hold on, check this out. So I know it's a little dark. You know, I've got the garage barely open because the sun beats in the afternoons, but I've been coming out here getting some work done here and there, you know, when I have time after work. So we've got fan shroud on, we got the pulleys on. Remember, we did the loose belt, don't bring it tight, but intake's on, carbs on. Clean the jets, I didn't pull the carb apart. Exhaust is on. That's actually the original exhaust that came on Jawbreaker when I bought the car. Pretty cool. It's going full circle. We've got our full flow set up temporarily on. This is a bracket that you put, basically it bolts in your fender where your rear bumper goes, and then, you know, you bolt your housing there. This is actually sideways. It goes different, but it works for this. No, the lines are not touching. Full flow setup. So these are push lock fittings. So those aren't regular fittings that you would use for AN lines, and then this is just regular 3/4 inch hose. So this is 3/8 NTP to 8 AN to 3/4 line, so it's a nice flow all the way through. These are 3/8 NTP 90s, you know, with the swooping ones. One thing I want to say real quick on that, let's go to the bench, is on the inside of the fittings, I used a Dremel and kind of cleaned it up, right? So I just sat there with like a little tiny burr, little hogger, whatever you want to call it. And I'll put a picture in right now, but as you see on one side, you know, the casting was there and it didn't have a nice flow. And then the other side, you can see where I've really cleaned things up a lot. So those AN fittings, I get them all from Jegs because they're actually a good quality. You really can't go wrong with it. You know, and it's got like 2 barbs on it, so it actually holds in real good because it's a push lock. They're designed for that, but they're designed for more of a, what do you want to call it, a different line. It's basically the same, but different, all right, the push lock hose. And then you use like a pinch clamp here instead of a worm clamp. I use worm clamp, but this makes it a lot easier to be able to pull your fittings off and on and your lines off and on. And then if you want, they have like these female style caps and male caps. You can actually pull a line, cap it, and not lose a bunch of oil and keep things from going inside and getting contaminated, whatever. We are so stinking close right now. We really are. Oh, another thing. Intakes. Use the metal intake gaskets if you are running a center carburetor because you want that heat transfer from the head into the intakes to help keep the fuel in suspension. Now, I do not have the heat risers hooked up on this. The reason being is they are cut off on these, so I'm gonna have to get something to figure that out later, or a different exhaust or something, but we'll get that figured out. What else am I forgetting to tell you? I mean, I've just been like 10 minutes here, 20 minutes here, 5 minutes there, you know, in the evenings after work, just trying to get this thing done. I want to hear this thing run. Before you comment this, no, I do not run Fram filters. I have that Fram filter because I got it from somebody a long time ago, and it's like a backup type of filter. I normally run these man filters. I've had excellent luck with them. They have like internal bypass in them. You can get these on Amazon, but this is the Fram filter that somebody gave me, and well, I just figured it'd be great for break-in. Now, for break-in purposes, technically, because this cam and lifters were in a different engine, and I marked the lifters to their corresponding holes, put them back where they belong, technically, we don't have to do a cam break-in. But what fun is it not to do a cam break-in? I mean, that's the whole point of the stress of a build, right? Sit there and see what's going to fail, what's going to happen. So we're going to do a shorter cam break-in. Normally you want to hold it at 2,500 RPMs for about 20 minutes. Vary your RPM a little bit and stuff. That way, you know, you can get the oil splashing in there and lubricating and keeping everything nice and good. So we'll probably go for about 10 minutes and just kind of see how it is. We'll bring you through the process. So unfortunately, right this minute, we're not going to be firing it up. Well, I mean, it's going to be in about 15 seconds for you, but I've got to wait. Literally, put fuel in it, build oil pressure, and we're ready to light this thing off. We are that close. One thing, hold on. The oil filter is already pre-filled, so I already have oil in that. I took my line here that comes off of my pump, held it up, and backfilled oil into the pump to help prime. Now, if you remember, I put a little bit of grease in there to help the gears grab something to prime when you first, when you first fire it up, or build oil pressure before you fire it up. Technically, I like to do it that way. Another way you can do it is you can pour oil into your relief valve. Sorry, not your relief valve. Pour oil into where your oil cooler goes and goes up to the front. Or right here, your pressure center, you can throw some in there. It'll actually backfeed and go down into that side. However, for us, we can't do it here because we blocked it off in the case for the full flow setup. So it's easier on a full flow setup. Just backfeed it through here. Literally, I just held it up and poured oil down it until that line filled up. I already pre-filled this. Put oil in the thing, put fuel to it. We'll build oil pressure. Once the oil pressure is built, we'll go ahead and stick our plugs in there, put that on. We're gonna light this baby off and see how it does. So, it's gonna be a few seconds for you, but unfortunately I'm gonna wait a couple days. So, see you here in a second. Well, the clouds went away, but as soon as I come out here to record, they come back. Thanks, clouds. So, pardon the glares. 60 works great as a workbench, thank goodness. It is now time to go ahead and fire this bad boy up. So, I've got oil in it and already a small oil leak. The sump cover plate right here, center bolt stripped out, so not much I can do about that right now. Not going to drain the oil out to go ahead and replace that real fast, so we'll just let it drip a little, no big deal. Everything's hooked up, ready to go. So we've got our little start bell housing assembly thing on here. This is a cut bell housing. I did a video on this a long while back, but it's a cut bell housing from a transmission, so I can bolt the starter up. Little start box. I've got the oil pressure gauge sitting here, ready to go. No plugs in it right now because I want to build oil pressure and prime the fuel pump. So we're going to turn it over until we get fuel pressure and oil pressure, and then we'll go ahead and put the plugs in. Now, something I got asked on static timing. I do not technically static time it with a timing light. Ooh. What I do is I verify that we are top dead center, and I rotate the cap and rotor so they line up perfect, and it gets you pretty close to top dead center. You'll have to tweak it a tad, but that's just what I do. It's quick, easy, and that's just how I do things. So I'm gonna go ahead and get you set up, and we'll go ahead and get this thing fired up. Well, I mean, build oil pressure first, then fire it up. Let's do it. Master switch on, we're not running the coil. Hit the starter and check out the oil pressure. I like it. All right, let's check the oil level, put in some plugs, hook the timing light up, and we should be ready to go. Hey, yeah! All right, we've double checked our oil. We've got our plugs in, verified our firing order. Should be about good. I've got the wire disconnected to the choke so we don't accidentally shut the choke off, because I want to use that choke to be able to hold the throttle open some. So let's see if we have fuel. We got fuel. Fire in the hole, I guess. I'd love to kind of take you over there and show you, but can only have you in one spot at a time. All right, here we go. We got a gusher. And this is what happens. So, dripping from up top there. This is no bueno, man. So that's probably the oil cooler seals. Oh yeah, look at it right there. Oh, it's the oil cooler. Son of a gun. You can see the oil dripping right there. Oh, oil everywhere. All right, well, on the plus side, it runs. Now I gotta find a new oil cooler. I've never had that happen before. That's a brand new oil cooler. All right, I'll bring you back. And we're back. I'm man enough to say when I mess up, because you know what? I'm not an expert. I just know enough. Speaking of that, there's a new shirt that says that on VWJawbreaker.com, but it's my fault we blew the engine up. Okay, well, we didn't blow the engine up, we blew the oil cooler. Ah, see? We blew the oil cooler. So, I got everything fixed, we got everything back together. Here's what the problem was. So, you've got two different style oil relief plugs. This one here is the earlier style that is for the single relief case. This goes in the rear part of the engine by the pulley. Okay, problem is you don't use these on these dual relief cases. You use the regular round one without that groove and the extra tall one. Yeah, that's extra tall. I'll put a picture in here to show you a difference between the grooved plunger and the regular plunger. So you take this extra long plunger with a stupid booster spring, which I thought wasn't a booster spring, and guess what? Between the two of those together, you have no chance of this going down far enough to relieve the pressure. That's what happened. We built way too much pressure and we blew this oil cooler. You live and learn, right? This is, I think, the only mistake I've ever made. I mean, off the top of my head, so could be worse, right? All right, so we got the glaring sun again, so pardon me for all of that, but we're gonna go ahead and get this thing fired up and try this again. I'm gonna put you over here this time so we can keep an eye on the oil pressure gauge. Hopefully you can see that in the video. We got our fuel on, we got our battery hooked up, everything's hooked up, timing light's sitting there, power's on. Let's go ahead and give her a couple pumps. Coil on. Let's try it this time. Fire the hole. It's alive. I am so not going to argue with that. I'm still going to dial the carb in a little bit. Timing's pretty much dead on. This one's idling right around 8 degrees, 9 degrees, and advancing to about 29, almost 30. So spot on. Oil pressure, much better. So changing out the springs and the plunger, that's what that needed. We are good. So all I was doing to kind of dial things in is your top screw right there is your air bypass, your bottom screw is your mixture. So you gotta kind of run, the more you back this one out, higher your RPM is gonna be. Then of course you just kind of run your mixture screw in until it starts to bog, back it back out until it smooths out. That's how you set your lean best idle in this situation. So, man, she sounded good. Belt was a smidge loose. I actually, when I put everything back together, I forgot to actually tighten it back up, but I wasn't gonna shut it down for that. She's alive, not a drop. Slight tick, which that's fine because, you know, we still got to go in and adjust the valves after the break-in. But that was a full 10 minutes. She ran beautifully. The reason she was shaking some is the choke was half closed, so it was running a little leaner. Temps were great. One thing I do is I like to kind of shoot it right about here on the head and kind of see what your head temp is here on all 4 sides. And then I shoot the case temperature here, somewhere right in this range here, to kind of see what your engine case temperature is. It's just a simple little infrared thermometer, nothing fancy, but that's what I use. So there we go, it's alive. So next I gotta pull the overland trailer out, get a few things buttoned up on that because it's almost camping season again, even though I'm standing here sweating. And then we'll finally dig jawbreaker out, get the 60 and jawbreaker side by side, slap this motor in it. And then we got suspension work, floor pans to fix, seats to find, to put in. We got some stuff to do, but don't worry. I appreciate you guys sticking around for these. It means a lot to me. Do me a favor, hit the like button. Drop a comment of what your favorite part was about this. Did it excite you to go out and work on your stuff? That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping I can help inspire you. Get out there and work on your projects. Do me a favor, subscribe if you haven't. Costs nothing. And it helps the channel out. Little things like that is what helps us grow. So, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for sticking around. We'll catch you on the next one real soon. Till then, be kind to one another and be good.